Have you ever imagined that a man in a wheelchair, once mocked and judged solely by his appearance, could change the entire course of a tense situation with a single unexpected move? Just think about it. If you were treated this way, how would you reclaim your dignity? Would you stand up to those who belittle you, or would you retreat? Today's story will make you reflect on the power of composure, self-respect, and solidarity. Share your thoughts and don't forget to hit the subscribe button to uncover more unexpected stories. William Turner, a man in a wheelchair, rolled through the quiet streets of Lincoln, Nebraska with an unusual sense of tranquility. Today, he simply wanted to enjoy a late lunch after a busy morning filled with errands. He had no idea that his life was about to take a dramatic turn, all because of one simple decision: stopping at Jerry's roadside diner. This small, familiar spot for the locals was where he sought a moment of peace, but instead it became the place where he would face an unexpected challenge. As William wheeled into the parking lot, the calm afternoon air of the diner suddenly shifted. A group of cyclists, 5 strong men in sleek sports gear with high-end bicycles, stood gathered nearby. Their curious eyes locked onto William, and their smiles gradually turned into scrutinizing glances. He could feel their stares filled with judgment, but he paid them no mind. He continued moving toward the diner, unbothered and unfazed. But just as he approached the door, one of the cyclists stepped forward, blocking his path. William paused for only a brief moment, his gaze steady and cold. Yet within him, a tension slowly began to build. This wasn't the first time he had been looked at with curiosity or disdain, but this time felt different. They weren't just observing. They were waiting for something, perhaps a reaction they could mock. Even so, William refused to let their rude remarks or condescending looks shake him. He pressed forward in silence, exuding an aura of quiet authority. But could he maintain his composure when faced with those who neither understood nor respected his strength? This story unfolds a powerful lesson in patience, respect, and how to confront adversity in life. The group of cyclists stood confidently in the parking lot of Jerry's roadside diner, their eyes fixed on William Turner as he made his way toward the entrance. Silence filled the air, but only for a moment. One of them, a man wearing a worn-out leather vest and sporting a thick beard, pointed at William and called out, "Rollin' Thunder!" It was meant as a joke, a nickname laced with mockery, something they found amusing. The others couldn't hold back their laughter, deep, crude chuckles echoing across the lot. William's expression didn't change. He showed no signs of embarrassment or fear. He simply kept moving, his eyes locked on the diner's entrance. But the mockery didn't stop. Another man in the group joined in, hurling another joke, fueling the laughter that grew even more callous. They turned their taunts into entertainment, completely oblivious to the pain they were inflicting on a man who simply wanted a peaceful meal. The tension in the air thickened with every passing second, as if each laugh cut deeper into William's resolve. Yet instead of responding the way they expected, he remained composed. He knew these men knew nothing about him, nothing about his life, his struggles, or what he had endured. But should he respond? Or should he maintain his absolute silence, letting them come to their own realization? At that moment, William understood something profound. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes the greatest strength is not in fighting back, but in maintaining unshakable composure, even in the face of ridicule. This story isn't just about William. It's about everyone who has ever been judged for things beyond their control. A silence so powerful that it forces others to recognize that their words are insignificant compared to the resilience of the human spirit. William Turner could feel the tension in the air as he entered the diner, the eyes of the cyclists never leaving him. Despite their jeers echoing behind him, he maintained an astonishing calm. Everything around him seemed to quiet down, leaving only the steady sound of his wheels and the mocking laughter trailing him. He didn't turn back, didn't react, not even once. Their words sliced through the air like sharp knives, but William didn't let them cut him. The cyclists mistook his silence for weakness, believing they had won. But William's composure was the answer they couldn't comprehend. He continued forward, each movement radiating quiet confidence. To him, the diner was simply a place to eat lunch. To them, it was a challenge, an opportunity to assert their so-called strength. Yet William refused to let their perception dictate his actions. As those around him started to feel the weight of his silence, he became the center of attention, not because he fought back, but because he refused to let them have power over him. Strangely enough, it was his refusal to react that caught them off guard. William didn't need to raise his voice or retaliate. He understood that confidence wasn't about shouting, it was about standing firm in the storm. He sat at his table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, gazing out the window as if nothing else mattered but that peaceful moment. He knew that not every battle required a fight. Sometimes silence was the greatest strength, and that was what truly left the group unsettled. The men who thought they could mock and intimidate him were now the ones left uncomfortable in the face of his unwavering calm. What made William strong? It wasn't that he lacked fear, it was that he knew staying true to himself was the ultimate victory. One of the cyclists suddenly stepped in front of William, blocking his path without reason, just pure provocation. William stopped, his eyes unwavering. He understood that this wasn't just a physical obstruction, it was a mental challenge. But instead of reacting with anger or sharp words, he chose silence. The leader of the group, a burly man in a black leather jacket with an arrogant smirk, stepped closer. He stared at William with disdain before speaking. "Get out. This place isn't for people like you." His voice carried a mix of contempt and threat, thickening the tension in the air. Conversations in the diner fell silent. Those words were meant to humiliate, a verbal slap in the face. But William didn't flinch. Instead, he met the man's eyes with an unshaken gaze, his silence harder than steel, his patience unbreakable. He didn't need to justify himself. He didn't need to defend his presence. That was his true strength. Before the man could escalate further, William slowly backed up, smoothly adjusted the wheels of his chair, and glided past them, wordless, unaffected. Just like that, he entered the diner, ignoring the expectant stares of bystanders and the cyclist waiting for a different reaction. In that moment, a shift of power occurred, not through aggression or defiance, but through sheer resilience. William's refusal to engage sent a stronger message than any confrontation ever could. Sometimes the greatest way to stop a challenge is not to fight, but to show that it never had power over you to begin with. The atmosphere in the diner grew still, as if time itself had paused. The tension that once hung heavy now seemed to dissipate, leaving only the quiet realization that real strength doesn't always need to be loud. William remained calm, his heart beating steadily in the diner's silence. The mocking voices and contemptuous stares from the cyclists still echoed in the space, but he didn't move, refusing to be drawn into the psychological battle they were trying to provoke. Despite the tension rising around him, he maintained his composure as if nothing else existed. The cyclists grew frustrated with William's silence. They continued their taunts, some sneering, their challenging gazes locked onto him. Each word they spoke carried a sharp edge, a mix of threat and ridicule, piercing through the peace William worked to preserve. One of them, a tall man with scars across his face, took a step closer. "You're not afraid of us, are you?" His voice was heavy with challenge. For a moment, silence hung in the air, long enough for everyone in the diner to feel its weight. The room seemed trapped in a pressure-filled void where no one dared to breathe too loudly. Another cyclist, a younger man, suddenly stood and moved toward William, not to strike him, but to add to the verbal assault. The group laughed, feeding off each other, convinced they were in control, as if their intimidation was just another game to them. But William didn't flinch. He didn't rise. He didn't waver. His gaze remained steady, his expression unreadable. He had learned that not every confrontation required resistance. There would always be people who lacked respect, people who sought to impose their dominance over others. Yet it was William's unwavering calm that rattled them, making them more unsettled. At that moment, a cool breeze drifted in through the window, carrying the crisp chill from outside. It was as if time momentarily stood still. Then in the distance, the low rumble of motorcycle engines broke the silence, growing louder as they approached. The cyclists stiffened. Their arrogance faded into something else, uncertainty, maybe even fear. The shift was immediate. William closed his eyes for a second, sensing the change. This wasn't salvation, it was a reminder of the power of unity and respect. With just one call, a community refused to sit back, while one of their own was threatened. The arrival of these unseen allies was a silent but powerful blow to the cyclists' arrogance. They had miscalculated, and now they were forced to swallow a bitter lesson. William's silence was never submission. It was a symbol of true strength, the strength of control, the strength of standing firm no matter the odds. This wasn't a battle William had sought, but he had taught everyone watching, including those who had ridiculed him, that a resilient, self-respecting man could never be broken. William sat still, unshaken, as the cyclists continued their taunts. Their crude words cut through the air like knives, but he refused to let them pierce him. His gaze remained locked onto those who saw him as an easy target, his eyes unwavering with quiet determination. For a moment, everything around him blurred into insignificance, leaving only the sharp edges of their jeers, feeding their false sense of superiority. But he didn't react. Not yet. Instead, he calmly slipped a hand into his pocket and retrieved his phone. While the cyclists continued their mocking, William quietly unlocked the screen, his fingers moving with deliberate ease. Unbeknownst to them, each word they spoke, each cruel laugh, was about to cost them. With a single call, the entire situation was about to shift. Holding the phone to his ear, William remained silent as he waited for the voice on the other end. His gaze never wavered, locked onto the group as their confidence began to wane. He didn't need to say a word. His composure alone was enough to unsettle them. Their arrogant grins flickered into something else: uncertainty. One by one, they exchanged glances, sensing an unspoken shift in the air. A subtle, creeping realization washed over them, as if something larger than themselves was drawing near. Then the low growl of an engine rumbled in the distance. Faint at first, but steadily growing louder. The cyclists fell silent. Their eyes darted toward the parking lot, drawn to the deep, resonant sound that now dominated the atmosphere. The rumbling grew, no longer a single noise but a chorus, an approaching force. A gust of wind swept through, and in that fleeting moment of clarity, they realized exactly what was happening. The diner's air thickened with a new kind of tension. The roar of motorcycles cut through the heavy silence like a blade. The powerful, rhythmic growl of the engines filled the lot as a group of riders emerged, their leather jackets glinting under the fading sunlight. Their presence alone was enough to alter everything. They rode in sync, a silent force of unity, their movements precise and deliberate. The cyclists, once so bold, now felt something invisible pressing down on them. The weight of a world they had no control over. William didn't move. He didn't need to. His calm expression remained unchanged, though a faint, knowing smile played at the corner of his lips. He had never needed to raise his voice. The power he wielded wasn't in words or aggression. It was in his unshaken resolve. The motorcycles came to a halt, their riders dismounting with effortless authority. The cyclists stiffened. Their leader, the once proud man who had mocked William, now scanned the faces before him, his confidence crumbling under the weight of their silent, unwavering presence. He swallowed hard, his bravado fading. That feeling, the sudden shift in power, the creeping fear slipping into each of them, made it clear. They had lost control. They were no longer the ones dictating the scene. And in that moment, the truth became undeniable. Strength was never about loudness. It was never about intimidation. True power lay in restraint, in the ability to stand firm no matter the odds. William had never needed to fight back. His patience, his control, and the quiet strength of those who stood with him had spoken louder than any act of aggression ever could. The parking lot fell into absolute silence, as if time itself had paused. The bicycles, once symbols of freedom and bravado, now seemed like mere shadows, weak and insignificant in the presence of a force far greater. The distant rumble of engines echoed closer with each passing second, an unstoppable storm rolling in. One by one, the motorcycles roared through the space, a tidal wave of raw power no one could ignore. William remained still, his gaze unwavering. He knew what was approaching, yet his calm never wavered. The cyclists, once laughing, once mocking, now felt the shift in the air. Their smirks faded, replaced by anxious glances. The laughter had died. In its place, unease crept in. Then they arrived. A group of riders clad in polished black leather, their presence as solid as steel, moved in unison. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their mere arrival weighed heavily on the atmosphere, suffocating the arrogance that had once filled the space. The leader of the riders, a towering man with a silver beard and piercing eyes, stepped forward. Each step sent a ripple through the cyclists, making them instinctively shift back. This was no ordinary encounter. The air grew taut, stretched thin by the gravity of the moment. The leader's gaze swept over the cyclists before he spoke, his voice steady, unyielding. "Apologize to William, then leave." No need to repeat it. The authority in his tone was absolute. The cyclists, once so sure of themselves, now stood frozen, their confidence completely drained. They exchanged uneasy glances, their postures shrinking. The predators had become the prey. Their silence was heavy with shame, regret, fear. The riders never lifted a hand. They never needed to. Their unity, their presence, like an impenetrable fortress, was enough to shatter the false strength of those who had once seen themselves as untouchable. The moment the cyclists finally muttered their apologies, the tension in the air shifted once more. The entire parking lot seemed to exhale, as if released from an unbearable weight. William didn't gloat. He didn't revel in their humiliation. He simply offered a small, knowing smile. He had won, not with force, not with anger, but with patience, self-assurance, and the quiet strength of solidarity. More than that, he had taught a lesson. Real power doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from respect. The weight of that lesson lingered as the cyclists stood motionless, the reality of their actions sinking in. Their heads bowed, not just in apology, but in recognition of a strength they had never understood before. The respect they had denied William was now freely given, unspoken yet undeniable. The leader of the riders stood firm, arms crossed, his gaze locked on them like an immovable force. No words were necessary. The silence itself spoke volumes. With their pride in tatters, the cyclists turned away, their departure marked by hurried steps and averted eyes. They had no words left, only the bitter taste of a lesson learned too late. William, still seated in his wheelchair, remained unchanged, steady, composed, untouched by their former cruelty. As he rolled toward the diner's entrance, he sought no validation, no recognition. He simply lived by his own truth. But as he passed, the quiet admiration in the eyes of those who had witnessed the moment spoke louder than any applause ever could. This was more than just a confrontation. It was proof that the greatest strength often lies in stillness, that true respect is not demanded, it is earned. William sat in the diner, surrounded by a silence that carried more than just quiet. It was the weight of an emotional shift. The cyclist had left in shame, but what surprised him most was the change in the eyes of those around him. The sense of threat, judgment, and disregard had disappeared. In its place was something deeper: respect, recognition of his worth beyond appearances. He didn't need to say anything more, nor did he need to do anything else. The apologies from the cyclist were no longer the most important part of this moment. What truly mattered was the way people in the diner now looked at him, with admiration, with a newfound understanding. William realized that despite being in a wheelchair, despite the struggles he faced, his actions today had inspired those around him. He hadn't just stood up against prejudice, he had shown everyone that no matter the circumstances, resilience and integrity were the ultimate strengths. Victory did not come from defeating an enemy, but from standing firm through adversity, maintaining composure, and never wavering. As he met the gazes of those who had witnessed the confrontation, he understood that he had won, not just this battle, but the battle of perception. For a fleeting moment, he had shifted their understanding of strength, proving that it wasn't about physical power, but about remaining true to oneself. The people in the diner, mere bystanders at first, now felt the quiet power that radiated from William. In that moment, he understood that strength wasn't just in actions, but in the way one lived, in the way one faced the world, and in the way one challenged prejudice without losing dignity. As he sat there, in the warm glow of the diner, a quiet sense of pride settled within him. He had succeeded, not because he had humiliated his bullies, but because he had taught everyone around him a greater lesson about respect, unity, and resilience. The cyclists, once brimming with arrogance, had left with their heads bowed in humiliation. Though life in the diner resumed, something fundamental had changed. The silence that lingered wasn't one of discomfort. It was a mark of transformation. The looks William now received were no longer filled with doubt or judgment, but with reverence. And while he felt the weight of their silent recognition, he remained as he had always been, calm, unshaken. This respect, the acknowledgement he had spent a lifetime earning, had not been granted through words but through action. Seeing the shift in the people around him, their understanding not just of him, but of others like him, William knew that what he had done was more than just defend himself. He had changed the way his community saw strength. He had made them realize that true power didn't come from physicality or intimidation, but from an unshakable sense of self, from facing adversity without losing one's dignity. As the distant rumble of motorcycles faded, the silence in the diner remained. Slowly people returned to their meals, but now there was something different, a quiet connection among them. They had witnessed a kind of strength that didn't need to be proven. William's actions had sparked something in them, a renewed faith in solidarity, kindness, and respect. He didn't need recognition. To him, standing firm in his truth, responding to cruelty with resilience, was enough. But as he glanced around and saw the subtle changes in the people's eyes, he knew he had made an impact. They wouldn't remember him just as the man in the wheelchair, but as someone who had shown that true strength lies in doing what is right, no matter the circumstances. And so this wasn't just a story about a single confrontation, it was a reminder. Never judge someone by their appearance, and never underestimate the power of standing firm in your values, no matter how the world tries to shake you. The lesson of William Turner. William's story teaches us a profound lesson about patience, respect, and unity. In life, we will encounter challenges and people who belittle or undermine us simply because of our differences. However, the true lesson is in how we choose to respond to those challenges. Strength is not found in retaliation or hostility, but in maintaining one's dignity and principles, despite the negativity around us. William didn't prove his strength through words or reckless actions. Instead, he demonstrated that confidence and composure are the most powerful weapons. When faced with cruelty and malice, the right action and unwavering resolve can bring about the greatest change. This lesson serves as a powerful reminder that kindness, respect, and unity can overcome any hardship, allowing us to stand strong and shape the world in the most meaningful way.